The visitation chamber fell silent the moment Daisy entered. But something was wrong. Her ears were flat, her body coiled like a spring, and then, without warning, she lunged, not at the man she loved, but at the guard standing in the shadows. A torn sleeve, blood on the floor, and clutched between her teeth. A hidden USB drive no one was supposed to find. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Jackson Cole had stopped counting the days. Time in a place like this was less a measurement and more a slow erosion. No sunrises, no seasons, just the mechanical rhythms of prison. Lights on at 5, chow at 6, doors locked by 8. The only variation came from the screams echoing down the block, the kind that came when hope was finally crushed under the heel of inevitability. But Jackson didn't scream. He hadn't screamed since Kandahar. Before all this, before the cell, the chains, the sentence, he was Captain Jackson Cole, a Bronze Star winner, twice deployed. In his unit, he was called Iron Hand, because nothing shook him. Not gunfire, not blood, not even death. But it wasn't the battlefield that broke him. It was life after war, the silence after the bullets. Emily had been his peace. She'd waited while he fought, stitched his wounds when the VA wouldn't, and reminded him who he was when the nightmares blurred the line between past and present. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer just 5 months after he came home. Stage 4. The doctors were kind. The system wasn't. Jackson sold his truck, then his medals, then his rifle. But treatment was slow, and death was fast. She passed in their bed, her hand in his. The silence afterward was not the quiet of grief. It was the hollowness of something vital being torn away. He drifted. Some days he drank. Most days he walked Daisy. Daisy. His golden retriever, not just a pet, his battle partner. She'd been rescued from a bombed-out village in Helmand Province. Trained to sniff out explosives, she'd saved countless lives. When Jackson left the service, she was retired too. She became his shadow, his one remaining thread to purpose, to sanity. The night everything changed was a Thursday. The bar was half empty. Jackson wasn't there to drink. He just didn't want to be alone again. A girl behind the counter reminded him of Emily, kind and soft-spoken. Then he walked in. Carter Doyle, 22, son of Senator Thomas Doyle, loud, wealthy, untouchable. He barked at the waitress, grabbed her arm, and called her names Jackson hadn't heard since boot camp. Jackson asked him to stop. Doyle laughed and shoved him, called him a washed-up war monkey. Jackson tried to leave, but Doyle followed. And when the beer bottle shattered over Jackson's shoulder, instinct took over. A struggle, screams, blood, a neck snapped on the edge of a table. The trial began 6 days later. The media feasted. Decorated killer. PTSD time bomb. No mention of the missing waitress. No mention of the bruises on her arm. The bar's security footage had technical errors. The senator gave interviews about the price his family paid for public service. And Jackson, he was smeared, stripped of dignity, and locked in a courtroom that reeked of pre-written guilt. His lawyer, a tired public defender named Martin, didn't even bother to mask his defeat. "I've seen quicker executions," he muttered after the verdict. Death row in Huntsville was colder than Jackson imagined. Not physically, though the AC always roared, but spiritually. It wasn't just a place for punishment, it was a graveyard for the forgotten. Most men there clung to some illusion. Innocence, martyrdom, vengeance. Jackson clung to none. He believed in nothing but Daisy. She was being held by a friend back home, though he hadn't seen her in over a year. When they asked him for his final request, he didn't hesitate. "I want to see my dog." The guards looked up from their clipboards. "Your dog?" One scoffed. "Daisy," Jackson said simply. There was laughter, a muttered "Jesus." Then, eventually, a shrug. Requests were granted all the time. Final meals, letters, a last cigarette. Why not this? One of the guards made a call. Arrangements were made. That night, Jackson lay awake on his cot, staring at the ceiling, picturing her. The soft pads of her paws on tile. The pink of her tongue. The way she used to curl around Emily's feet on cold mornings. He remembered the last day he saw Daisy, her sitting beside Emily's grave, unmoving for hours. When he called her, she didn't even lift her head. Something in her had broken too. And now, one last visit, one last goodbye. They came for him the next morning. 2 guards, silent as usual, but he could feel something different. A tension, as if they knew this was more than just protocol. As they led him down the concrete hallway toward the visitation room, Jackson caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. Unshaven. Gray, overtaking black. Wrinkles carved deep into his cheeks. But his eyes, they were sharp, awake, waiting. For what, no one knew. But it was coming, and it would wear fur. Revelation. The air in the death row visitation chamber was still. Too still. Like the hush before a gunshot. Fluorescent lights cast a sickly hue over concrete walls, their faint flicker pulsing like an arrhythmic heart. Jackson stood in the center, shackled at the wrists, but not from fear. He wasn't thinking of death anymore. He was waiting for life, for her. When the steel door hissed open, it wasn't the sound that drew every gaze, but what stepped through. Daisy. She walked slowly, not the eager, tail-wagging retriever they expected, but something else entirely. Her posture was taut, deliberate, her head low, her nose swept side to side like a scanner, reading the air not for sense but for secrets. Every guard stiffened. Their hands moved unconsciously to their belts. Jackson's heart clenched. "Daisy," he breathed, almost in disbelief, but she didn't look at him. Her ears twitched, body trembling, not from fear but from tension. Her eyes locked on a figure to the left of the room, Sergeant Tyler Briggs. He leaned casually against the wall, arms folded across his broad chest, expression neutral. And then, she growled. It was guttural, deep, a sound born from primal instinct. Her lips curled, teeth bared like knives honed on betrayal. Briggs took one step forward. That was enough. Daisy lunged. Chaos cracked open like a thunderclap. Shouts erupted, chairs overturned. One guard reached for his taser, but Jackson shouted, "No!" his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Daisy was already there. She latched onto Briggs' arm with the unyielding force of a soldier's partner trained to immobilize. His sleeve tore, revealing more than flesh, a small, tightly wrapped object taped against his inner forearm. Metal, black plastic, a USB drive. Gasps. Footsteps. Someone called for the warden. "What the hell is that?" the warden bellowed, storming into the room seconds later, his face pale and pulsing. 2 agents in suits who hadn't spoken since arriving sprang into motion. One secured the drive, the other cuffed Briggs. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't paranoia. This was a breach. This was proof. The room fell into stunned silence as Daisy backed off, her eyes never leaving Briggs, who now lay slumped, blood dripping from his wrist, his mouth shut tight, but his fate unraveling with every byte of data being extracted. And when the footage played, unedited, uncut, it burned through the lies like fire through dry grass. Jackson Cole had not killed in rage. He had survived. Stakes, the truth, when it finally surfaced, did not trickle. It detonated. By dawn the next day, Jackson Cole's name was everywhere. From cable news tickers to social media firestorms, from whispered corners of legal forums to loud chants outside courthouses. The video leaked within hours of the USB's recovery, copied by someone inside the investigation and passed like a lit torch to the public. It was raw, real, undeniable. Jackson wasn't a murderer. He was a man who tried to walk away and paid for it with a death sentence. Headlines spun like blades. Veteran framed by senator's office. The dog who exposed a crime. #free Jackson trends worldwide. Talk shows booked military psychologists and legal experts. Pundits argued over systemic rot and veteran neglect. But the footage needed no interpretation. It had no bias. Jackson's restraint in the face of Carter Doyle's assault, the fatal moment of self-defense, the frantic aftermath, all caught on a security angle that had been deleted from the official evidence. Except it hadn't been deleted. It had been stolen. Hidden. By Sergeant Tyler Briggs, who now sat in federal custody. His pale face splashed across the news with the headline, "Prison Officer Confesses in Corruption Scandal." The confession came within 48 hours. Under federal interrogation, Briggs cracked. He admitted he was paid $50,000 through a shell contractor linked to Senator Thomas Doyle's office. His instructions were clear: suppress the footage, silence the defense, and ensure Jackson Cole disappeared without noise. Daisy, Jackson's companion and wartime partner, had sensed something hidden. She had smelled the adhesive tape under Briggs's uniform, the faint chemical residue of storage. Trained to detect IEDs and electronic components, she had followed her instincts, just as she had in the deserts of Helmand, and triggered a chain reaction no one could stop. The senator fell next. Public trust vanished like smoke. Investigators uncovered falsified case notes, campaign donors linked to hush funds, and a string of manipulated prosecutions that stretched back years. Under pressure from his party and a wave of furious voters, Doyle resigned in a nationally televised address. His eyes were sunken, his voice clipped, and he never once mentioned Jackson Cole. But the country did. Jackson's execution was stayed within hours of the leak. His sentence overturned within 11 days. He didn't walk out a free man immediately. Red tape still clung like rust to the system, but the walls were collapsing. Appeals moved at lightning speed. Judges reversed rulings once thought immutable. People who had ignored his case were now quoting his name as a symbol of justice corrupted and reclaimed. But amidst the storm of headlines, debates, and unraveling legacies, something quieter held the nation's breath. Daisy. She had been injured in the scuffle with Briggs, biting down hard, absorbing a blow meant to dislodge her. Her jaw fractured, a puncture wound on her side, internal bleeding that hadn't been noticed until hours later. She was rushed to a veterinary trauma unit unconscious by the time they arrived. Outside the clinic, people gathered, hundreds, then thousands, candles, posters, children holding signs with her picture. Daisy, hero dog. She fought for the truth. Don't let her go. Inside, surgeons worked in silence, thread by thread, hour by hour, as the world outside held its breath not for a man, but for the dog who refused to let lies win. Because Daisy wasn't just a dog anymore. She was justice with teeth, and the country wasn't done watching. The gates of the Huntsville Correctional Facility groaned open under the weight of history. On the other side, a crowd had gathered, not with signs of anger or chants of outrage, but with silence. Reverent, breathless, as if witnessing something sacred. Cell phones recorded, news vans hummed, but in the center of it all there was only one man and one dog. Jackson Cole stepped out slowly, the sun hitting his face like something unfamiliar. His beard was trimmed now, but gray had overtaken black. The lines on his face were deeper, carved by years he would never get back. In his eyes there was no triumph, no victory dance, only quiet understanding of what had been taken and of what had somehow endured. Beside him limped Daisy. Her fur had been shaved in patches where the surgeries took place. Bandages wrapped her side. A faint scar curled above her brow, but her tail wagged, slow, determined. She walked with the stubborn grace of a warrior who had paid her toll and returned from the fire. The crowd did not cheer. They wept. A woman in the front row collapsed to her knees, hands pressed to her mouth. A young man in uniform saluted, tears streaming down his cheeks. Children clutched their parents' legs, sensing the weight of the moment even if they didn't understand its shape. Jackson paused just past the threshold. He looked down at Daisy. The cameras surged forward. He ignored them. And then he knelt. Slowly, painfully he sank to one knee, the sun casting long shadows across the concrete. He took Daisy's face in his hands. She leaned into him, eyes closing, tail still flicking with effort. "You saved me twice," he whispered. "Once from death, once from forgetting who I was." She licked his hand. No statement followed, no speech, no press conference. Jackson simply rose, nodded to the crowd, and walked forward, Daisy hobbling at his side. They moved slowly through the sea of people, the space parting like a tide of awe and gratitude. Weeks later, the government passed the Daisy Act, a bill requiring full transparency in all prosecutorial evidence chains. It mandated third-party audits, digital duplication of all submitted footage, and criminal liability for suppression. A law built on a wound, on loyalty, on teeth that bit through the rot. But Jackson wasn't there for the signing. He had disappeared from headlines, moved to a weathered cabin tucked deep into the New York woods, near the Canadian border where snow fell early and silence ran deep. The kind of place where no one asked questions, and cell service died between the trees. There, Jackson trains therapy dogs for veterans. Each one learns Daisy's discipline, her attentiveness, her empathy, her courage. And each one is told her story, not as legend but as memory, as truth. Daisy rests more now. Age has caught up. But every morning she greets him at the door, eyes cloudy but alert. She still patrols the perimeter, slowly, and curls beside the fireplace each night like a sentinel whose war never truly ends. Some visitors cry when they meet her. Some kneel and thank her. Some just sit beside her in silence, needing no explanation, because Daisy did more than save a man. She reminded a nation what justice looked like, with fur matted in blood, eyes sharp with knowing, and a loyalty deeper than law. And that is what shocked the world.